Thank you so much. Good morning. Welcome to a really special day. It's spring, it's dreary, but it's hopeful. And welcome to this Donaldson Fellows event. We started this, actually, stand corrected. Last night I said it was 2009. I think it's actually in 2008. And it's called Donaldson Fellows event because we've got Bill and Jane Donaldson here. And I wanted to just say a little bit about Bill and Jane to get started. They really activated the mission to educate leaders for business and society. Yale did not have a, quote, business school, and does not have a business school. It has a school of management. And for centuries, it did not have anything in that space. And I wasn't around then, but I suspect that there was resistance to having some kind of school like ours. But there were a group of people who figured it out. And Bill Donaldson came in and helped conceive of this unique school that is a school of management that has a broad mission to educate leaders for business and society, that kept a focus on not just the business sector, but multiple sectors. And I was reflecting on the fact that now, in this academic year, this school is so centripetal to the rest of Yale. We draw over 1,000 students, non-SOM students, to our classes. That's about equivalent of 120 full-time students from outside of Yale SOM to this school. Quite amazing. We have so many joint degree students. I think we're, in a sense, the hub school for all joint degree students around Yale. And I don't think we would be here today playing that hub role, not only within Yale but beyond, without Bill and Jane. And Jane was the person who admitted the first few classes of students and helped place them. So let's hear it for Bill and Jane Donaldson. And stand up. So this program, as I said, got started in 2008, and it's a peer-driven program in the sense that Yale SOM alumni nominate their fellow alumni to receive this prestigious Donaldson Fellows award. And then there's a committee of faculty and staff and people in the dean's office to do the stagecraft. And we've got 4 amazing leaders who exemplify the school's mission. And I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to introduce all of them. I'm going to do that and then ask each of them to say something about what's happened between the time they left Yale SOM till now. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Professor Tom Kolditz, and allow him to go deeper into the leadership journey that each of them has been on, and go forward, and then we'll open it up to further dialogue. So let me first introduce Jaime Gonzalez Aguade, class of 1996. Jaime is right here. And he earned his MPPM degree from Yale School of Management, and throughout his career, he held diverse and important leadership roles in Mexico's public sector. These roles required a deep understanding of the interconnections between the public and private sectors and a deep understanding of different cultures. He's currently the president of the National Banking and Securities Commission in Mexico. That is analogous to, but not perfectly so, to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, U.S. SEC. He was appointed to this position in December 2012 on the instruction of the President of Mexico. He supervises and regulates over 4,000 financial institutions to ensure the stability and proper development of the financial system and its relationship to the global financial system. Jaime was elected as president of the Council of Securities Regulators of the Americas. This includes security regulators from North, Central, and South America, as well as the Caribbean. Jaime's leadership requires, obviously, an understanding of the global conditions and interests. Earlier in his career, he held key leadership roles in energy and banking. As Undersecretary of Electricity, he was responsible for planning and designing the country's energy policy. And as General Director of the National Savings Bank of Mexico, he promoted deep penetration of financial services for the lower income population. And he's also president of the Yale School of Management, the Yale Club of Mexico. Jaime, congratulations.
Thank you.
No, I'm gonna introduce everybody first.
Okay.
To Jaime's left, from your perspective, is Beth Axelrod. Beth graduated from Yale School of Management with her MPPM degree in 1989. In 2014, she was cited as one of the top 50 most powerful women in technology. And as her nominator for the Donaldson Fellows Award stated, she is one of the most competent HR executives in the world. After School of Management, Beth joined the organization and performance practice at McKinsey. In 2002, this catapulted her to the role of Chief Talent Officer at WPP. Many of you know that organization. We've done a really interesting case study on it, and we've had members of their leadership team here. It's a fascinating organization. In 2005, she was recruited as the first ever Senior Vice President of Global Human Resources at eBay, which is, a lot of people associate Beth Axelrod with eBay. This past year, Beth has dealt with Carl Icahn's breakup efforts of eBay and PayPal. Carl's been busy. Justice Department investigation, and the resignation of the president of PayPal. Beyond these public issues, she deals with an astounding number of internal challenges. This comes from working with a company with 38,000 employees in Silicon Valley, where change and growth are rapid. This morning, I think we learned that eBay brings in about 5,000 new employees every year. eBay ranks first among tech companies in recent gender workforce equality statistics and other metrics. And it's in large part due to Beth's leadership. She's played a major role in this dimension of eBay's success. She's been able to translate her own experiences in investment banking in the 1980s and the challenges she experienced there to success in developing eBay. She's been a tremendous alumni leader for Yale. She's participated, for example, in managing creative talent panel during the Evans opening about 15 months ago, right here. She plays an active role in ongoing campus recruiting for eBay, and she's on the board of our leadership development program and Yale Women. Congratulations, Beth Axelrod.
Thank you.
Next, I have the honor of introducing Kathy Julian. Kathy graduated from Yale School of Management in 1984 with her MPPM degree. Kathy has had a tremendous career in international development finance. She brings integrity, leadership, and financial skill to projects which improve infrastructure and promote economic development. Early in her career, Kathy worked for financial services companies in the US and Asia, including her role as vice president for Wells Fargo. For almost 2 decades, Kathy has held various roles at the Asian Development Bank, ADB. She's had placements in the Philippines, Nepal, and now in the Republic of Georgia. ADB is a financial institution owned, controlled by 67 member nations. Its tools are loans, grants, policy dialogue, technical assistance, and equity investments. These tools are usually applied to invest in infrastructure, healthcare services, and financial and public administration systems. While based in Manila, Kathy led a tremendous effort to bring clean water to 2 million people. Kathy didn't let the challenges of being an American female in Pakistan during geopolitical turmoil of 2007 to 2012 deter her from her work there. The first obstacle was obtaining $100 million financing from ADB. And for 2 years, Kathy was only able to travel in Pakistan with armed guards. Kathy is currently the ABD Country Director for the Republic of Georgia. She came from Georgia to be with us today, and we really appreciate that. She leads the strategy and programming for nearly $800 million in loan and grant assistance to Georgia. She has worked to bring the resources of banks and other partners to local government and non-government agencies. As one of her nominator states, Kathy galvanizes others to get projects completed without seeking personal recognition. Congratulations. Welcome. To my right is Chuck Slaughter, who's a graduate of both Yale College and Yale School of Management, class of 1990. Chuck began his career in documentary film. However, he changed course in 1987 after being inspired by an article about Trickle Up, an early pioneer of the microfinance movement. Volunteering at Trickle Up exposed Chuck to the transformational power of micro and social entrepreneurs in the developing world. After graduating from Yale SOM, Chuck founded TravelSmith, a mail-order travel gear company. The company grew 150% a year annually for 6 straight years, leading its sales to hit 100 million. Chuck sold the company in 2004 to return to the social sector. He spent time in Kenya leading a successful turnaround of a system of micro-franchise clinics serving the poor. There, he witnessed the inefficiencies of the fixed storefront model. He wondered if Avon's model of franchise door-to-door agents could be effective in the fight against poverty and disease. So he researched the Avon's model and even spent time as an Avon person. This experience convinced them that Avon's model of direct selling could be applied to products people desperately need. And based on his experience and conviction, Chuck launched Living Goods in Uganda in 2007. Living Goods is building a sustainable distribution platform for products designed to fight poverty and disease in the developing world. It operates networks of independent entrepreneurs. They make modest income going door to door, selling affordable products which improve the health, wealth, and productivity of the world's poor. Chuck's tremendous work has been recognized by many others. For example, he was selected as a World Economic Forum Social Entrepreneur of the Year in 2013. He's also a member of the Yale School of Management Board of Advisors. Congratulations, Chuck. So as I suggested, maybe it would be good to get a quick round of comments. And I mean, so between leaving Yale School of Management and now in your leadership role, as I said, in a position that's analogous to the US SEC, is there one thing that you might want to say stands out in terms of a particular juncture or something about yourself or a particular practice that you would like to share with the Yale SOM community?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dean Snyder. Thank you again, Jane and Bill, for the honor of being here. I've always been working in the public sector, and as we were talking during breakfast, it is difficult to talk about how you become a leader or not, and the different aspects of feedback in different cultures, especially in the public sector, and especially in the public sector, I would say, in Mexico, even though probably Kathy also can relate to that. Let me tell you about a special or a circumstance that happened on my return to Mexico. Probably many of you remember the tequila crisis in 1994, when the banking sector in Mexico, all of it, no, most of it, went bankrupt, and the government had to intervene in many of these banks, and they started to re-administer the banks, and there was an effort to sell the banks back to the private sector. So I was in charge of selling one of those banks, and there was an auditorium like this, and obviously after many months of trying to recapitalize the bank and to go on a roadshow and sell the bank again to the private sector, we went to Spain, we went to the US during the roadshow, and nobody thought that the bank would be sold. So in the bank's auditorium, there was an auditorium like this with only one chair, where I was supposed to announce the winner of the auction that we had, the public auction that we had. Fortunately, after many months of work, the auction and the bidding process was a success, and it was the largest amount of bank was sold at that time in Latin America. The bank, which was called Serfin, was sold to Santander. Santander still exists in Mexico and around the world, and it's one of the largest banks in Mexico. So when I came down, like we just did, through the door to announce who had won the bid, there were 6 chairs instead of 1, because all of the chairmen from the institution that was created, which is called IPAF, which is something similar to the IFDC here in Mexico, said, no, we want to say what the result was, because it was a very good result. So that showed me that first of all, you've got to take opportunities, and you can work in a group, because since nobody thought this was going to be a success, we were just the new kids in the block who were working on the program to sell the bank. Probably everybody thought that since it wouldn't have a good result, that we would take the blame for that. No. So what I learned is that working in group, working together, you can get good results. And especially, as we were talking during breakfast, that you have to have feedback. No, nobody told us afterwards that we did a good job. Somebody else took the merits of doing that, the whole process. But it showed me that through work, through having goals, through good group work, that you can achieve your goals. And what I learned, and what I've always tried to do afterwards, is to have good communication with our teams, with our to create good feedback, and to create a good working environment through groups in order to achieve what you can do. So that is something that I learned here at SOM, that I applied during my early career, and that has, through all my career, been a very important part of my work. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great first installment in our discussion, so thank you. And Beth, so 1989 till now, in your leadership role at eBay, what might you want to pick out?
So let me just start by saying thank you, Dean Snyder, and thank you to Jane and Bill Donaldson for this extraordinary honor, and to the alumni and faculty who had a hand in the decision. I'll share with you a little bit of one of my own career experiences and how I think my experience at SOM informed my decisions. So just a little bit on my career background. So I studied finance as an undergraduate and started my career in investment banking and did that just long enough to realize that was not the way I was going to spend my career, and came to SOM specifically to start to orchestrate a shift in my career. And when, as Dean Snyder pointed out, I went to McKinsey, I actually went there intending to do a 2-year stint while I figured out what I really wanted to do with my career, but ended up staying 12 and a half years and was what I label a regular strategy consultant at McKinsey. So as a regular client-serving partner, doing strategy consulting across all industry sectors, so with no industry specialization. And 12 and a half years in, started thinking maybe I'd like to try something different. And I decided to leave McKinsey to start my career in HR. And I think that, so this is back in 2002, and I think it's safe to say I was the first McKinsey partner ever to leave the firm to go into human resources. And so there are a lot of people trying to understand that decision. And when I reflect on the extraordinary opportunity I've had since I left McKinsey and just the incredible career opportunity in human resources, I think there are a number of aspects of that decision that actually relate back to my experience at SOM. So I said, we had dinner last night, and I said last night at dinner that it's not a coincidence that while I was at McKinsey, while my focus was strategy, my personal passion was around organization behavior. And as Dean Snyder referenced, I was initially a member of the firm's organization practice and then ultimately a co-leader of the organization practice, and came to lead McKinsey's second generation of research called the War for Talent. And that research was really designed to draw the linkage between better talent management, and company performance. And as I got more involved in that research, I just became incredibly intrigued and curious about the profession of HR and the role that HR can play in driving the performance of companies. And so when I think about, well, where did that curiosity come from and where was my initial introduction to that? It was actually right here, not physically here, because we were not in this lovely building. We were down the street in the older building. But it was when I came to SOM and I had the opportunity to experience areas of learning that I had never been exposed to either in my educational background or my prior work experience. And so for me, it happened to be organization behavior. For all of you, it could be any number of topics. But one of the great things about SOM is it provided the space to explore new ideas, new learning, new potential for growth that I hadn't seen before. And organization behavior for me was one of those things. I think the other thing that made it really possible for me to make a decision that was very sort of unexpected was also related back to my experience at SOM, because one of the things that was spectacular when I came here were my peers, my classmates, your equivalent of this wonderful auditorium full of students, that I came to SOM and met people from all around the world who had backgrounds that were very different than my own. There were actually very few former investment bankers in the class, and there was just about everything else. And what I learned in spending all of that time with my classmates over 2 years is that there are all kinds of different career paths that one can pursue and that bring remarkably different perspectives to organizations and to businesses. And I think that exposure to the diversity of backgrounds and interests made me just open to the possibility that there doesn't have to be a single grooved path. And even if there is a grooved path that is the one that I was supposed to pursue, that not only was it okay to deviate from that path, but it was actually a really spectacular choice to do so. And I look back on it and I say, how fortunate am I to have made that shift from management consulting to human resources. And I think the exposure to a diverse set of backgrounds at SOM freed me to be able to make that kind of a choice.
Thank you, Beth. That phrase, grooved path, is something I'm going to remember. I think it's such a great point, and it's something from where I think we've moved away from here, and it's just a great point of distinction. And I think it's a challenge for all of us to think about how to chart our own paths that are not grooved. So thank you for those comments. So Kathy, 30 years, not to date you, but 30 years after graduating from Yale SOM. So you're at the Asian Development Bank in a country called Georgia. And you've had experiences being moved around the world with armed guards. But what do you want to talk about in terms of picking out one thing?
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I want to echo what my colleagues have said here. Thank you very much, Dean Snyder, as well as Jane and Bill Donaldson, for this amazing honor of the fellowship. And I am also appreciative of the alumni and the faculty who contributed to that, and have really enjoyed the past couple days, or the past day, speaking with the students here. Brings back fond memories of my time in 1982 to 84. And in looking back at my experience, and as you mentioned, I went into financial services with Wells Fargo, then I had a stint with a merchant bank in Asia, then back to an educational services company in California, and then the Asian Development Bank. And the common thread there is, and something I would recommend to all of you folks, is a commitment to a meaningful career, committing your time and effort to something that you believe in, something that you have, as Beth mentioned, a passion for. And that will enable you to carry through all the rigors of bad bosses, good bosses, difficult situations, challenges, geopolitical strife, whatever. But as long as you have committed yourself to a meaningful work and a vision for what you want to accomplish. And in my case, it was always development and a fascination with economic development that cut across cultures, a commitment to trying to do something better in the world and more efficient. And what I brought from Yale was an understanding of how you could make the public sector and the not-for-profit sector more efficient and effective. And it was a commitment to try to bring that to a large organization committed to development, such as the Asian Development Bank. So I think in my travels and in my work, particularly in Pakistan, where we helped establish with the government corporatized water utility and sanitation utility. This was an amazing opportunity to introduce change and at the same time do it leading multicultural groups and working within a very, at times, a difficult bureaucratic environment. So, but what sustained me through that was the commitment to the vision and the passion to get something done. And I attribute a lot of that to my experience at Yale SOM in the early years, where, as Beth mentioned, there were a diversity of people, an understanding that you could combine the public and private sectors, and that they built upon one another. So I think that's what makes Yale SOM special. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Wonderful, Kathy. Thank you. And again, just a brief comment on my part. I think you identified something very important, and that's that motivating vision, looking ahead and having that sustain you through tough times. And so thank you for those comments. So Chuck, founder and CEO of Living Goods, other endeavors, multiple career paths and influences. So 25 years, what do you want to pick out?
Stop counting the years.
Sorry.
I guess I wanted to talk, you all hear me? I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of failures and setbacks and how that's shaped my path. And one of them I meant to mention to you, Beth, was the reason I've done what I've done has a lot to do with failures and setbacks. And one of the early ones was when I was a second year at SOM. I applied for a job at McKinsey, and I got to the third round, and I got dinged. And I'm quite sure had I gotten that job, I would have had a very long career at McKinsey, and I wouldn't have done the other things that I've enjoyed doing. I ended up working at another management consulting firm called Maricon, and you talked about horrible bosses. And my life was shaped in that moment by a horrible boss. I worked for a partner there who did not take IGB, as it turns out, who after 9 months, I just could not bring myself to come to work in the morning, and that was the moment of inspiration for TravelSmith. I thought it gave me a lot of time to daydream about what else I would like to do. And I should actually, even upstream for that, I mentioned this last night, I tried to start 2 businesses before TravelSmith, which were both failures. And from all of this, I learned things, and in each of them changed my path. And one takeaway from this is, you talk about grooves, it's very hard to predict your path. I think we labor under a little bit of the illusion, growing up in the kind of institutions that we're fortunate to participate in, that you can make a path and stay on that path. And life has many more surprises in store for you, I promise you. Part of my journey since then in starting a company and then starting a nonprofit, I think, is understanding sort of the balance in entrepreneurship between having a vision and having the confidence to make a vision come true, and understanding your weaknesses and approaching your work with some humility about what you're not so good at. And believe me, if we had time, I could go into quite a long seminar on that topic. But I'll recall just briefly two moments in my path that revealed for me what I didn't know after starting TravelSmith. One was, early when we were in this very fast growth mode, and we were bringing on a new cadres of leaders, and I had to learn leadership myself and teach it to others at the same time. And I was very fortunate to get introduced to a coach and leadership development person who came to TravelSmith and helped teach not only our employees, but myself and my business partner, also an SOM grad, Scott Sklar. And he taught us this approach to leadership, which is situational. The myth, which I think still endures, is that leaders have a style, a default style, that they're born with, or that's their nature. They're hard-charging, they're visionary, they're technocrat, or they're very supportive, or they're very delegative. They're good at hiring. And what this coach, his name is Paul Schroet, brought to us was the notion, that the most successful leaders are ones who adapt their style to the needs of the situation. And I think it'd be an interesting area to explore more, but I've really tried to come back and tap into that wisdom. The other lessons I actually didn't learn on the job, I learned from my family. When I was fortunate to have a father and an uncle, my father's younger brother, who were successful lawyers. It's not often you get leadership lessons from lawyers. Apologies to any joint degree around here. And my father repeated something often, and my father's long gone, and I never would have repeated anything he said while he was alive, of course. But he often said, there's no limit to what you can accomplish when you're willing not to take the credit. and when you share the credit with the person you're working with your team. And let me just say, and we can dig into it further, I found this to be true not just in work and business. I found this to be true as a spouse and as a parent and as a friend, time and time again. I was fortunate also, when I was building my business, my father had passed away, and I persuaded my uncle, who was a lawyer, to join the board of directors for TravelSmith. And just an interesting anecdote, he would have been understandably seen as somewhat of a partisan on this board, being a blood relation of mine. And he had a very simple practice, which I think relates to this notion of humility. He's a very, very sharp guy. In our board meetings, he remained silent. He spent 90% of the board meeting listening, every point of view around the table. And he would very patiently wait till this discussion had been heard. He would share back what he had heard, and he would save just one gem for the end of the discussion. And everyone listened to him, despite what might have been seen as a familial loyalty. And it's because he was such a good listener. It's because he was spare in his words. So I've always tried to remember that one germ about speak last.
Wonderful. So we have a lot to build on, Tom.
Yeah.
And with Jaime's focus on teamwork and at critical junctures, and Beth's drawing deep and being willing to go off path, and the importance of that training at Yale SOM, and Kathy's sustaining vision, and Chuck's importance of listening and humility. So, Tom, I'm going to throw the ball over to you and let you go where you want to go.
Well, terrific. Thank you very
But no horrible bosses.
All right, we won't go there. First of all, thanks so much to these fellows for coming in and sharing their experiences and lives with us. Thank you to the Donaldsons for allowing this tremendously developmental event to occur, and thank all of you for being here and being so engaged. I can already tell that you're interested in this. So the way that I plan to draw out some of the other perspectives that they have is I'll ask two questions. I'm just going to ask them two questions, and one's going to be a very straightforward question about crises or big challenges that they've had. And by the way, they haven't had these questions in advance, so they're being cold called up here, which they can, of course, relate to you all. But I'll ask them that, and then I'll ask them to talk a little bit about being faced with change. But before I formulate these questions and we begin on it, I just wanted to frame this process a little bit for you, both in terms of the nuts and bolts and a broader philosophy. So just in terms of ground rules, when it does go over to student question and answer, please raise your hand, and you need to have a mic. This is being live streamed, so when you ask your question, we'll get a mic to you, and that's the way that we'll be able to hear you. The purpose of them being here is not necessarily so that you can look at their distinguished past and focus on their path. The reason they're here is because when you look up here, you're seeing into your future. These people represent the potentiality that you have. They represent, in some ways, the unpredictability of your career path, and you're focusing on opportunities that perhaps you can't even imagine yet. So I'd ask you to have that forward-looking view that what we're really doing is drawing out your future and how you'll apply what you learn at the School of Management in your lives, as much as we appreciate the distinguished contributions that these leaders have already made. So on Monday, the class is going to discuss crisis leadership, and we'll be joined by one of our alumni, Henry Johnson, CEO of Fiduciary Trust, who's going to talk about his experiences there. But I'm also interested in your perspectives on the most difficult times that you've had to lead. You know, and perhaps you could tell us just a very short story about that, just relate it to us, and then connect it to the experience that you had in the school of management. You got through it. Something helped you do that. And just think in terms of what your education here meant to you and how that pushed you forward. And I'll give you about 5 seconds for one of you to volunteer, and then I'll cold call one of you.
I can start us off.
Sure,
I don't know that I don't know that I would specifically label this example a crisis, but I would certainly label it a moment of great change. So I joined eBay in 2005, and in 2009 made the decision to take the global HR function on a significant transformation beyond what we had previously already done. And I knew it was absolutely the right thing to do for the business. It was, given the growth aspirations of the business, there was no way the function could scale doing what it was doing, which was largely done by brute force. And it's such a strong statement about eBay and the people who will just rise to the occasion no matter what it demands. But there does come a point where brute force really does no longer scale, and we were actually long past that point. And so my leadership team and I imagined a different HR organization and a different approach to it. But to do that really required redefining the function, every role in the function, the way work is done. And I knew it was the right thing to do, but I also knew that it was going to have a significant impact on my team, and that it was going to mean that a whole bunch of them would ultimately lose their jobs. And so I had to think about how to navigate us through what was going to be a multi-year journey that in my own mind I was clear was going to take us to a very exciting new place, but that ultimately wasn't going to have a home for every single person who is currently on the team. And what I learned in trying to take my organization through that was the importance of, at a time of great challenge and anxiety and uncertainty, the importance from leading in front, which is not my preferred way to lead. I'm very much of a lead from behind person and put my team right out there and give them opportunities and cheer them on and support them in every way to enable their success. But what I was really forced to confront is there are moments in time, particularly moments of great challenge and great uncertainty, where people do need and want to be led in front. And to do that requires tremendous, constant, reliable communication. And it's got to be reliable, and it's got to be credible, and it's got to be really connected to the people on the team. And when I reflect on that time, and when I think about credible, reliable communication out front, connected to the team, as I reflect on it, I realize it's actually a lot about trust. That in a moment of great challenge, trust can carry the day, and it's a good reminder to us as leaders that we have to instill trust all the time in what we do, because you never know when we'll be called to a even greater task, and it's hard to rise to the occasion when the foundation of trust is not there. But with that trust, virtually anything is possible.
You said that we had already gone through this crisis, which it hasn't passed. So I'm not sure if it's going to end up well. But in November, we had to intervene a bank for the first time in many years in Mexico, and we had to intervene the bank because a fraud was committed there, 200 million fraud. that hurt around 7,000 people that were saving in this bank. So in a country where you're trying to manage institutions and where they don't have the necessarily the strong institutions, communication becomes really, really important, no? So it becomes a matter of if we did it right, even though it was a fraud and it's going to be proven as a fraud, the institution, the CNBV as an institution, is put on the spotlight, trying to generate the confidence and the correct communication that what we did was right, and that it wasn't the government who committed or allowed this to happen. Frauds happen, financial frauds happen every day, everywhere in every country. But it's very difficult to communicate this. And you're having an institution being put in, again, in the spotlight to try to communicate and to have everyone understand, society, Congress, the rest of the financial sector, that what you're doing is it was what the law said. So right now we're in the middle of this. We are, even though we have already intervened and we closed down the bank, the insurance deposit is paying in a slow way, but it's paying all of the people that were saving, and all of the users of this insurance are having their deposits being paid by the amount of the insurance deposit. But we are, the part of communicating, the part of relating, the part of telling your team inside the CNBV to be strong, to keep saying and communicating that what you did was right, that's a very difficult thing, no? Especially when every day you read the newspaper and the front page of the newspapers are questioning what has the CNBV done. So I think that is a very important crisis that just has happened. It's the first time the CNBV has faced in the last 20 years a problem like this. I am positive that what we have done is the correct thing, but it's very difficult to communicate, and it becomes also an issue inside the institution. So being able to lead that team, being able to communicate to the whole team that what you're doing is right, and that not to read the newspapers and not be affected by that it's a real issue. And I think we're going to come out okay, and things are starting to turn around, but it's something that you have to deal in, probably in smaller or larger issues, but having faith in your team and them committed to the problem at hand is one of the things that I think is very important in human resources and in creating good institutions and good teamwork.
Terrific.
Okay, thank you. My example isn't exactly a crisis unless you consider it a crisis of water and sanitation in a province of Pakistan. But it's also an opportunity to channel resources and teamwork into solving a problem. And that was in the late 2000s in North Sindh, Pakistan, where there was very little water supply, very little garbage pickup, and the streets were filled with litter and sewage, and people had no water, and they would buy bottled water. So that's the reality. And then the response to this crisis was much as what Beth was saying here about trust, communication, credibility. It involves imagining a better future and being able to tell the community and the provincial government a compelling story about how they can change their reality. And it begins with doing a lot of research, going around to all the various development agencies and other government agencies to understand what was the core of the problem, why has it gotten this way, what are the incentives driving it to be this way, how do you change those incentives, and finding champions within the communities and within the government who can seize upon this vision and run with it, because you can't. You're the financier. You can provide some assistance, but that's all. So I think what I learned there was the importance of seizing upon a positive vision of the future, being able to communicate it across a variety of government officials, for everyone from the provincial government to head, the SIN secretary, to villagers who wear a traditional costume, of course, and don't shake your hand because you're a woman, and in an environment where, you know, men and women were separated, so you'd have to communicate differently with each. And so trying to shape that compelling vision of the future, bring it to a level that each one of those groups could understand, and find the political incentive, why they should buy into this, what they will gain. I shouldn't say individually, because it wasn't meant like that, but what they will gain in terms of their position and how they can more effectively do their job or represent their community by following and supporting this vision. So this was one of the challenges that I found in my recent career history, and I think that's something that, again, getting back to what Beth had said about instilling, having credibility because you've done your homework, you've established the basis for change, and then being able to communicate that the future and the story of how you get there in a very simple way, and doing it with complete sincerity so they trust you and they feel that, yes, you will take them on this path. Of course, it's wonderful to be working for an organization like I do, where you can bring the resources to play. You can bring hundreds of or thousands of dollars to get projects done, and you can bring in expertise, so that's wonderful as well. But it's about instilling the trust, the credibility, and telling a good story.
I like the question, Tom. What we, at Travelsmith, what we always told our team was, you know, we have a vision for this company for the long term. And we say, if we're going to be around for 50 or 100 years, we are going to go through moments of crisis. And so you cannot be a great enduring institution unless you are great at dealing with those kind of moments. We had a big one. Not surprisingly, it came in 2001. We had been growing very fast. We were extremely profitable. We were making 13% EBITDA on over $100 million. 2001, the events of September 11th occurred. And you can imagine it was a bad time to be in the retail business. It wasn't a particularly good time to be in the travel business. And of course, we were in both. And within a few months, we went from being a 14% positive EBITDA company to being a negative 10% EBITDA company. And I think what got us through is the themes that the panel has been talking about, honesty and trust. And that involved both with our bank and with our team. We're way ahead with the bank. As soon as we saw the financial sliding, we were in front of the bank telling them what we thought the picture was going to look like, giving them the news before they saw a financial report. And you can imagine the difference, and I'm sure, Jaime, you can relate, how banks react when they get that news from you directly ahead of time versus when they get it, you know, once the story is writ. And similarly with the staff, is you just can't be too honest, you can't be too fast. I think it's when you pause or you wait or when you withhold the truth is when you get yourself into trouble. And people know it. You know, it really does not pay to try to hedge or to be overly optimistic in those moments. You really have to be real. People know it, whether it's your bank or your employees or your board, they'll know it when you're not.
Well, those are terrific responses, and I think they really get to the long-term characteristic of the School of Management in terms of you all being able to share honest and straightforward feedback with one another and setting the conditions for intellectual honesty in the school that follow you into these roles where the ability to establish trust in a condition of uncertainty is what allows you to move forward as a leader when you don't have the numbers, you don't have the predictability to give to people to keep them on your team. So as ubiquitous as crisis is, and we were obviously 4 for 4 up here, change is much the same. That when leaders go into organizations that they want to grow and move forward, that results in having to make changes. And sometimes that's not popular with everyone in the organization. Broadly speaking, people don't like change. They like irrelevance even less, but sometimes they can't see that that's in their immediate future. And so I think all of these leaders that we have up here have a broad base of experience with that. So if you could, it doesn't have to be a long, involved answer, but tell us a little bit about your experience with having to enact change in an organization in a positive way. And I know, Kathy, I mean, you have some really compelling experience in terms of actually building change with resources and strategies and so on and so forth. So maybe we could just begin with you. And if you could also connect it back into the School of Management. I mean, what was it about going through here that put you in a better posture to enact that kind of change in the career that you've had?
Well, I suppose one of the benefits of going through SOM was the diversity of the student base, which allowed one to learn how to work with a variety of people from a variety of industry sectors and motivations. So I think that's very important when you're embarking upon change in an office or an organization. You've got to understand what your main ingredient is, and that's the people that you're working with, your staff, the team, and understanding what their needs are and what their motivations are, and then tailoring the change agenda to these various forces that you're looking at. So in that sense, I think that was something positive that I from Yale, and also the importance of listening and feedback, which I'm not the first person up here in the course of the last couple of days to comment upon our very positive experience in the 1980s with the IGB and the initial organizational behavior course that we all went through here, which was very instrumental in teaching awareness about yourself and how that then helped you affect better teamwork and better leadership. And I think to affect change, you have to understand at a personal level yourself and how you interact with your team so that you can make those changes happen. So thank you.
Chuck, what do you think?
Well, you know, this is an area at Living Goods right now that we're I wouldn't say, you know, we're really trying to instill. You know, again, may be obvious, but I think we're certainly living in a time where strategies are changing faster than they ever have. Competition is nimbler. The barriers to entry in some industries are lower, and competition comes faster. And so we have 5 guiding principles of Living Goods, and one of them is really around embracing change and creating a culture where people learn, you know, experiment quickly, learn quickly, and try new things. And I find that you're constantly fighting against the resistance to change. You're fighting against complacency. And I always read with interest the annual Warren Buffett letter. And it was one of his themes this year. He talked about, you know, he has his ABCs that defeat big companies, arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. And he cites any number of very large companies which no longer are among us because of what they became dominant in their categories, but complacent. And so we're constantly challenging our team to try things, to move out of their comfort zone. And it's not easy. People have a tendency to get to keep doing what they know.
So I can build on the example that I started with a moment ago. And as I was reflecting on your question about what from my SOM experience might have been helpful, I was thinking about a class I took, I think it was called Organization Diagnosis. It was a full year class, and we were placed with a not-for-profit in the New Haven area, and our job, if you will, was to go in and to literally diagnose how the organization worked and how the organization functioned. And it really caused us to think very deeply about the dynamics of an organization and the interaction of the people and how that does or doesn't enable performance. And I'm sure in many ways that I don't even know that influenced just how I think about organizations and how I think about change. And as I tried to take my own organization through this massive change, I think it started where Kathy already referenced, which is there has to be a compelling reason to change. Like, nobody's going to change just because. And so the most obvious two reasons that might be a compelling reason to change are either a terrible crisis or an extraordinary opportunity. And we were not facing a terrible crisis, but we certainly had an extraordinary opportunity. And so what I tried to do was paint a picture of what the growth opportunity was for our company and how what we were doing within HR really wasn't going to enable the company to achieve its goals unless we changed some of the things that we did. So the first part was explain the compelling reason why my team needed to change. The second piece was painting a very compelling picture of what it was going to be like, having a vision of this future state that was something that my teammates could say, that's fabulous, I want to be a part of that. But that picture, if it's so remote from where we are today, which in my case it was extremely aspirational and far from our reality, that can also be overwhelming and daunting. And so the next piece was really breaking it down into some very clear steps of here's what we can do first and this is what we'll do second in order to move in the direction of that image that we wish to become. And then the final piece was really around removing the obstacles and aligning everything that we do to this new vision. And so even if it was a matter of redefining people's roles and the expectations in the roles in a way that would enable them to operate in the new model, but to bring everything into alignment so people could see how it fits together and how their role fit into it. And I think that it's actually remarkable what a team can do when given the reason to do it and a path to make it happen, because what I asked my team to do was audacious. I asked my team to do in 12 months what normally gets done in 24 months, and really only because of my own naivete. I didn't know that most companies take 24 months, and so 12 months seemed like a good time frame. And people can achieve remarkable things if they believe in the vision and if they trust each other and they trust the leadership and they feel like they want to be a part of that future.
Like you said, people don't like change, no? So I've always faced that it's very difficult to implement change, especially in cultures or in places where people have been doing the same thing for probably 30 years, no? So I remember that there was a case study in one of the classes here in which, in a company, I don't remember the company, but they gave like a prize to anyone who would put forward something that would make the process better, no? So in a particular bank I was CEO of, in a development bank, where we tried to change the dynamics of and putting forward the customer, which is something that they were not used to. We implemented this sort of change, no, in which through what they knew how to do or what they were doing, but they knew they could do better and to be more efficient in their process, we implemented the same thing, no? And that allowed us, even though we had talked about being a better bank and being whatever the vision was, you need to identify the people who are willing to do the change and who probably know better than you what the change could be, because they know the process better. So I think that talking and communicating is very important, but you need to find within the company, within the institutions, people that are willing to embrace the vision and to talk to the people that are already there and how the change can be possible. And I think that's very important in order for the vision to become a reality.
That's terrific. All right, now it's your turn. And when you pose a question to the panel, you can direct it towards one of the fellows, or you could direct it towards the panel, but we probably won't go all four, probably be one or two answers from the panel, and then we'll move on to another question. So with that as sort of the ground rules, who do we have with a question? Here you go, Chris.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming and speaking with us. In your time, more recently, looking at the folks who are coming out of an MBA and working in your organizations, can you talk about any common mistakes that you're seeing often, as well as any sort of exciting innovations you're seeing coming out of the MBA students?
I think Beth ought to answer that.
Yeah, exactly.
So my most frustrating observation is a sense of entitlement, a sense that I have arrived, I'm here, and what are you, employer, going to do for me for my career? And I don't know, do I need to comment further on that? It's really not the best foot forward with the new employer. And I think I think that there's a mutual contract that employees and employers make, and there absolutely is a responsibility on the part of the employer to create a great career experience, but also on the part of the individual to show up and put their best effort forward and to perform the role that they signed up for without a sense of entitlement, but with a sense of, I actually think with a sense of enthusiasm and excitement and gratitude and possibility of what can be. And I think in terms of, that's a good segue into what do I really like about the folks that are showing up, and we do hire a lot of undergrads as well as MBA and PhD students, is the tremendous sense of possibility of what can be. There's something really special about a new person showing up in the organization because they don't yet know how the organization works. They don't yet know all of the challenges that might exist in getting things done. They show up keen and eager and imagining all of the possibilities. And that optimism and that imagination is extremely healthy and productive for organizations. And that's probably the thing that I appreciate most with our recent college grad hires, whether they're MBA, undergraduate, or PhD.
Could you describe a time when you identified a serious deficiency in your skill set, emotional, as a manager, anything, that you saw as a real threat to your success in your career, how you identified it, and what you did to remedy the situation?
I'll bite. I think just briefly, one of the myths that one has, I remember having when I was getting out of undergrad and grad school, was that you were just going to figure things out and get better and better, and in terms of management skills and leadership skills, let me just assure you, it's a very long journey. And for me, it's a struggle that I've had from the beginning, and I continue to struggle with. And I think was pointed out to me early, is the tension between, as an entrepreneur or attempting to lead in any function in an organization, having a bold vision and having confidence in that vision, but also knowing what you're crappy at and what your weaknesses are, and specifically for me, it was around, as many people progress in their paths, you get really good at something, and that often gives you the opportunity to do the next thing, which typically involves managing people who do the thing that you used to do. And how do you, let go of doing that thing and managing, helping people do it better than you did. And so that's sort of letting go of over-managing or micromanaging. Constant struggle for me. It was been pointed out to me, I think, from my first employee to many of my current ones. There's a brief example of this. I hired a terrific person for head of marketing for TravelSmith. I tried to follow this dictum, which I teach to all my staff, which is always try to hire people bigger than you. If you do that consistently, you'll get a really powerful, terrific company. And I really tried to take this to heart. I hired someone who had much more experience than I did in marketing, worked at a much bigger company than TravelSmith was, and she did a great job. And yet I continued to micromanage her like an idiot, to the point where she came to my office in tears one day. And this is somebody who I not only respected, but I really liked. And then it took, this person coming to me in a state of severe emotional distress for the light to go on. And the light is still trying to come on these many years later.
Terrific. Here?
Thank you so much for being with us today. This has been really great. This question is specifically for Kathy, but potentially Jaime and Czech may have some stuff to say about it too. I'm curious, when you're thinking about making huge changes, particularly in a developing country, how do you balance painting that compelling vision of the future without sort of implicit negative moral judgments about the present?
Well, in the case, one way is to choose carefully where you're going with that message. Make sure you're going to an area where things are not good, and they know they're not good. They want to change. So it's not as though you're giving them a picture of their reality that they have no clue about. They know. They're sitting in it. It's garbage on the streets. They're tired of it. Their kids have diarrhea. They can't go to school. So you have to choose carefully where you go with your assistance, and then hone in on the simple messages with a positive bent of, yes, it's like this, but this is your future. This is what it could be step by step. But you also have to understand this is why your future, this is why this has developed the way it has, and these are the underlying problems. Now that may be, that's where it gets sticky, because that's where you get into issues of vested interests. And sometimes the problems are there because of the vested interests. So you're bucking against some major changes that you have to make there. But you go where there's a need. And in the case of a lot of places where we've gone, the government understands that there's a need here.
Can I answer? I agree. No, most of the time we tend to think that the people don't know what they're doing or what they want. But it's more a question of why the service or the opportunities are not there. But once they have them, they embrace them, no? And I've seen it this many times. But an example that comes to my mind right now is in the past 5 or 6 years, the bicycles that you can pick up the street and to go from one place to another, those didn't exist in Mexico City. And the main problem was that people thought that everybody was going to steal, 20 million people of population in Mexico City. They would never return the bicycle, no? The program has been working, the bikes are there, people take care of them, and you don't have to give anything for for that. No, people understand that there's a greater good, and that what they want is to have the opportunity. No, and I have like this many other examples, but I think like Kathy was saying is that the message is very important, but people inherently know what they want and know what is better for them.
Okay.
Hi, this question is for anyone who'd like to answer. And it has to do with how you figure out what type of leadership style you need for a particular moment or for particular people. And Beth had talked about kind of having to deviate from her normal style of leading from behind to lead in front in a particular moment of crisis. And so I was wondering for Beth or anyone else, how do you figure out what is needed from you in a particular moment?
Well, you know, I mentioned my opening remarks about having this leadership coach who taught us about situational leadership. And one of the secrets behind it, I think, partly to answer your question, is it's a conversation between you and the person who you are, or the group that you're managing, and coming to a mutual understanding about what the situation calls for. Where you get in trouble is where you don't have agreement about what the right style is. And, you know, I can't tell you what the right style is for any particular situation, but I can tell you if you're not in agreement with the team or the person you're managing, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking about that question. It's a very interesting question, and I think my answer has to be I intuit more than anything else, that it's more intuitive because in my day-to-day role, I have a personally preferred leadership style. As I said, it's very much a lead from behind style, and that is my default in almost all circumstances, except when it just occurs to me that something different will be needed. In the case of the example I gave, it wasn't an in-the-moment decision. It was pretty clear that if we're going to embark on a transformation, that I would have to modulate my style to something very different. But what my own experiences around modulating my own style is that it's best to, generally speaking, only do it around the edges. Trying to show up as a leader other than the one I am is pretty tough to pull off. It takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to show up very differently. And there are very few circumstances that I feel compelled to do that. The circumstances would be very extraordinary circumstances, and if the occasion calls for it, then so be it. But I do think I show up as my best leader when I show up as myself, and I think part of the discovery here is figuring out for each of you what does that look like for you, and then being open to modulating it on the edges, but really not trying to be somebody other than the leader you actually are.
Katie, right down here.
Thank you all. So we've mentioned that a lot of you have gone through periods, I think all of you have gone through periods of personal and also organizational transition. And I think those times when we question where we are and feel like maybe it's not quite where we want to be are really important moments. Making a shift, like going from McKinsey to HR, takes a lot of personal reflection. And I think those times are often the moments that we're most proud of, looking back, because we can see how transformational that was. But they're also the most uncomfortable, especially when we're asking more questions than receiving answers. And I think there's a lot of people in this room who are in the process of that, and I'm just curious if any of you have insights into those times of transition, and both kind of taking care of yourself while you're doing that, but also really taking advantage of them as opportunities, because I think we're going through it now, but we'll also continue seeing them in our lives throughout the future.
I feel compelled to answer this because I am actually about to have a personal transition. So, a few people in this room know that when the eBay board of directors made the decision to separate eBay into two companies and to do the IPO of PayPal, my manager, who happens to be the CEO of the company, said to me, so Beth, when we separate the company in two, which of the two jobs would you like to have? Would you like to be the head of HR for eBay, or would you like to be the head of HR for PayPal? And I said to him, John, that's actually a very big question. I think I would like to reflect on it. And this is a statement of, like, he and I are very, very different. So he's a completely think out loud extrovert, and I am a very self-reflective introvert, although that might not seem evident, but, and I said, I need to go away and think about that. And he said, oh, I know that. I don't need to go away and think about it, but just if you were to give me an answer right now, what would your answer be? And I said, well, if I were to give you an answer right now, John, my answer would be that I'm going to take neither. But I would like to reserve the right to reflect on that and come back to you and tell you if I have a different view of it. And about a month passed, and I realized that I hadn't given it another moment's thought. And it occurred to me that the very fact that I hadn't given it another moment's thought meant that it was in fact the right thing to do. And so shortly after we announced that we were separating eBay into two companies, I announced to my team that I was actually going to retire from the company. And this month is my 10-year anniversary at eBay. And so I have announced that I'm going to retire. I had a very interesting experience. I came to my 25-year reunion with my husband, who's also a class of 1989 grad last year. And everybody said to me, oh, here eBay's separating. Which company are you going to join post-separation? And I said, well, actually, I'm joining neither. And with a sort of fair measure of disbelief, every person said, are you kidding me? What, you're really not taking either of the jobs? And I said, I'm really not taking either of the jobs. So then the next question, of course, is, what are you doing next? And the answer is, I have no plan. And it is the most wonderfully liberating thing. And what's so fascinating is when I say that to people, particularly people who are my generation, it's met with, I feel like everybody projects their anxiety back on me. Like, what do you mean you have no plan? And my have no plan is to do exactly what your question was asking, to not presume that there's an appropriate next step for me, that I should go and find a CHRO job of a next bigger, exciting company, but to really reflect about what is the next stage of my career that will give meaning to my professional life, and to not hastily make that decision, but to grant myself the freedom and the luxury of self-reflection to really give that some considered thought. And that's what I am in the process of doing. And I think it's something, I said this yesterday to some folks I was talking to, I think it's really important to free yourself from what is expected for you to do next, and to figure out what will make you happy and find a way to do that.
That is a terrifically inspirational answer to end this session on. But more questions to come.
Tom, could I just before you let all these folks go, could I also say something?
You certainly may.
But if you wanted to say something first, you should go first.
No,
I'm going to do the Chuck thing.
Okay. Well, if I was just going to orient them on the rooms.
Okay. I'll make a comment and then you do the orientation. So I wanted to add my congratulations once more to each of these people and just thank them. I just love this session, and it's one of my favorite days of the year, and I know that you enjoyed it as well. Oftentimes in these situations, I do try to offer my own personal reflection, just because I like to be an active listener and share with you what I'm thinking about, and maybe related to the school a little bit as well, and then invite dialogue with you after. So I was struck by this potential tension between the following. On the one hand, we want the sustaining vision, we want the bold, we want the aspirational, we want the optimism. And with that, hopefully we get motion, we get change. And change is not unusual, it becomes the norm. And that's great. And then we got some insights about how to make that into sort of baby steps and keep it going. And, you know, it was confirming to me about some of the things that I really love about the school. One is the school always feels like a work in progress. One of the things we talk about in the dean's office and with the senior team all the time is the school's never in a standing position. We're always moving. And that seems to work well. But I think the tension that I was alluding to earlier is that optimism and confidence does sometimes abut with problems. And I think what I was picking up today was great insight as to how leaders encounter everyday situations where things aren't going well. And how to balance that sustaining vision, that optimism, that confidence of where you're going, that aspiration with, okay, you also have to make adjustments and get feedback and keep on plan. Otherwise, you do go into that situation of great crisis. Now, sometimes you can't avoid the crises. They're 2001 and you're in retail and travel. But, and I thought the points about the role of communication and trust and group and credibility were really important for each of us when we're thinking about these individual leadership attributes and practices in a group context, including ours. So again, thank you, and Tom, thank you so much for your wonderful leadership and orchestration today. Tom, now what happens next?
Well, it's great. What we're going to do is reconvene by cohort in a number of different rooms, each room having a facilitator and one of the fellows. And so you'll be able to, if you have unanswered questions or unasked questions, you'll be able to do it there. I'll go through this just really quickly for those of you who don't have it with you. And Chris, if there's any change to this, let me know. But room 2200 is Beth Axelrod and Heidi Brooks with the gold cohort. 2410 is Jaime with Sarah Biggerstaff and the blue cohort. Kathy Julian in room 4200 with silver and with me. And room 4410, Chuck Slaughter with Lori Kelly and the green cohort. And those facilitators will come down and pick up their fellows and move in that direction. But 11:15 be in there. And then that goes until 12:15 and then 12:30 to 2, lunch with the fellows. All right? Thank you all for being here. That was awesome. Your first answer to that crisis question was